All right, we're back.
Oh, let me start again because I've just cleared my throat whilst you were doing that.
All right, we're back. um, do I have anything to say today? I don't know if I actually do.
Do you have anything to say?
I
I don't know.
know.
We
We're
thought
back.
we'd sit down again.
We're sat
We
down
did
on
it once.
on the couch, on the black couch that looks suspiciously like another black couch, but we're not gonna worry about that. And we're holding our microphones for the first time in show history, so I don't know how that's gonna go.
Hold my mic.
Yeah, but we're back.
Yeah.
It's Saturday.
Sixth.
Saturday the 6th. Yesterday was bonfire night, Guy Fawkes night. I still smell a little bit like smoke because I went and burned some stuff at the allotment for our brave Catholic plotters. You know, I figured we both have some stuff we want to talk about, and I figured we'd both sit down on the couch and bring it to our brave listeners. Would you like to go first this time, or would you like me to go first? Because I went first last time.
Well, let's talk.
All right.
We thought we would sit down. Are we going to speak primarily about the climate apocalypse?
That's what I was thinking.
It's topical, is it not?
It is topical, and I've kind of been panicking about it a little bit. And I think the reason I suggested maybe we do something along those lines is because it is it's so apocalyptic, and it's not something that we've been talking about a whole lot. And I think that I was thinking about this just in terms of our parents' generation and the bomb, right? And them being there could be a nuclear apocalypse at any second, and kind of trying to compare that to the climate catastrophe.
Okay, that's interesting.
And I was trying to figure out which one I would like more, and I think I would prefer the ever-present threat of everything could end in an instant. You could just be vaporized into dust, as opposed to it's currently happening all the time, slow grinding towards potentially an extremely apocalyptic outcome. And I feel like that's a little bit more anxiety inducing. I mean, potentially more catastrophic, no, but I don't know. Both of them aren't great.
No, okay,
Yeah.
Yeah, which is preferable?
I mean, I guess we could still be blown up.
We could still be. There are still nuclear weapons.
There are still nuclear weapons.
Yeah, tune in next week for.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, when we're in
work
a
out how
bunker.
we'll just do a different apocalypse every week.
Yeah,
Comes
robots.
thoroughly
Yeah, but I don't know. So I figured we should talk a little bit about climate. It's the end, I guess. We're coming to the end of the COP26 talks, I believe, after this week. And everything pretty much got solved as far as I can tell. So there isn't too much to talk about. But I don't have too much to say about those talks specifically. But you know what is one thing I kind of wanted to bring up? It's made me actually kind of like Greta, if I'm being honest.
Okay.
I don't know if this is a hot take or a cold take, but I always kind of thought of her as the liberal, when are our leaders just going to sit down and hash this whole thing out? But she came out today and was just this has been a complete failure. And it kind of made me go, all right.
It is
I kinda
not a
like Greta
secret that COP26 is a failure. It should be obvious that we cannot solve a crisis with the same methods that got us into it in the first place. And more people are starting to realize this. Many are starting to ask themselves, what will it take for the people in power to wake up? But let's be clear, they are already awake. They know exactly what they are doing.
I think, I was reading an article earlier on in which she was being quoted, and my response was, why we turned into this person.
Yeah.
But then I haven't followed her quote-unquote career.
Sure.
And I don't know really what her origins or function is.
Yeah, what are her origins? Being a kid? Or did she
Well,
get
quite,
out?
well, this is, when you said that, what it made me think of was maybe she serves as the function of the kind of collective sigh, you know?
Yeah,
Just
sure.
Ugh. Well,
Yeah.
what were we expecting? You mean you got your hopes up?
Yeah,
You mean you're
exactly.
expecting something out of this?
I mean, she's
And of course she fulfills the role of being the figurehead of the next generation.
yeah, she's got to become a socialist, right? Because if she doesn't, she's just gonna go insane. Because she's gonna keep going to these talks. She's gonna keep going to protest Putin showing up at these talks, or protest Biden showing up at these talks or something. And eventually she's gonna go, something's got I don't know. These people aren't just gonna sit down and hash it out. Because she does recognize what the problems are, maybe. But she does need to have that class. I don't know. We're criticizing a young girl, I guess. But what I'm basically trying to say is I wound up liking her after this week.
Cool.
That's all I gotta
All
say.
right, then.
That's all I gotta say. Well done, Greta. You get our seal of approval for this week.
Suffice to say,
Uh,
we're advocating socialism as the solution to the climate crisis.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Or just blocking roadways.
Yeah?
You know, why not?
That's going well.
You know what's so frustrating about that is that, like, yeah, it is just the kind of like no real thinking about what's actually causing these problems, et cetera, but it is just like such a pure distillation of like our powerlessness. And it's like, wow, like you can't really get too frustrated with these people because at the end of the day, it's like they're kind of doing something. You know what I mean? They're not really doing anything, but at least they're doing something. And the fact that there is the working class like movement, the workers' movement or whatever, is at such a low ebb. That just makes me go like, oh.
Sure.
It's like a bunch of pensioners blocking roads.
So, yeah, so for anybody who doesn't know, we're talking about the Insulate Britain protests, which is basically an outgrowth of Extinction Rebellion, or at least seems to be the same constituency and the same repertoire for the most part. As you've alluded to, the primary mode of protest is blocking of roads. And it's resulted in some of the most peculiar kind of like instantiations of, I guess, the quote unquote, what would you say, like culture wars?
Yeah.
As they exist or manifest themselves within the various conflicting portions of the British psyche.
Yeah. Did you see that guy who just threw a bunch of ink on all the
Yeah, there was
What
a guy
that
who just
about?
walked and sprayed ink on the front of all of these people.
It's like
did he have that with him? Did he
I
run
know.
home to get it? Did he know where the protest was going to be and then
it's like I
come
had
with it?
this
I mean, like
to make a wash for my 40K army. But I saw some goddamn pensioners.
So
They
I don't
needed
know
it.
what happened to that guy. I hope. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, like,
Hope justice has been served.
yeah,
Well,
whatever that would be.
yeah, whatever that would be. I don't know.
But also there have been multiple occasions of people like very slowly like driving their cars into these people. Mobs, small mobs, I suppose, like all the mobs.
Yeah, mobs.
Groups of irate drivers have dragged people out of the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So
just-
I suppose it does, like, as you say, like it. The response is indicative of a kind of like an impotent one almost. It's like
Exactly,
you don't
yeah.
have any actual connection to a basis of power, and it's sort of an acting out almost.
Yeah.
Whilst the broader Extinction Rebellion sort of protest wave did quite a lot to put the climate on the agenda, I think I do have quite a lot of reservations about its tactics. Both.
Oh, well, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you're exactly right. It is just that impotence, isn't it? And it's so frustrating because it's like, you want to criticize them for that, but it's also like, that is like the extent of like any kind of like protest to what's going on with the climate or anything. And it's frustrating. And it's like, these are people who legitimately believe that they're like exercising political power. You know what I mean? Just like the, libs or whatever who are like put your political power by voting or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
it's impotence, isn't it?
I wonder whether it's a distinct and definite improvement upon a sort of organised A to B march
Sure.
through central London, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
Is it an improvement of that, or is an A? I mean, maybe they're just different types of protests, because an A to B march at least allows you to demonstrate your numbers.
Yeah.
Whereas this, in some ways, is even worse in that, like, it's a very small number of people, like, doing the most confrontational thing.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
the same time, it's quote unquote militant, I suppose.
Yeah. Well.
But maybe it's militancy in the wrong place.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's exactly it. It's not like I have a problem with people like venting their frustration over the coming apocalypse by like blocking roads, because like, yeah, hey, block all the roads you want, especially when they're blocking roads like going into Heathrow or whatever. It's like, hey, cool, good for you. But it's like, if that is the extent of our political power, are we fucked? Which brings me into my next topic. Yes. We both, I think, read a little bit in preparation for today from the Weekly Worker. And I was reading something by a guy whose name I forget, an article the title of which I also forget, but it had something to do about like green Malthusianism, and Malthusianism, like, rearing its ugly head once again, and about overpopulation, and about kind of blaming the climate apocalypse on these goddamn people. And there's too many goddamn people.
Everything will be fine if there just weren't any human beings on the planet.
I mean, it's, they make a good point.
I mean, it's like true, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I don't know. I think mainly what I would like to talk about is just doomerism, and about like how do we actually relate to the seriousness of what's going on. And I bring up that idea of like green Malthusianism because it's like people really think that they're having a like rational response to what's going on when they're like just don't have kids. You know what I mean? There's like the wing of Extinction Rebellion. I forget what it's called, but it is just like women who are like, we refuse to have children until this is like sorted out. And it's like, on one end, you get it. Like, obviously, there are going to be increasingly erratic responses to the coming, I keep saying this, but the coming apocalypse, like, as time goes on and when people don't have an actual organ to exercise political power to do something about it. But it's freaking me out, all of these different responses, and it's not great.
I guess there are probably two rationales for an anti-natalist approach to the climate apocalypse. I guess one is the general, let's reduce the population.
Yeah.
And the other one is, I don't want to bring people into a world where the future is uncertain.
I really have a problem with that last one. I really think that's so gross, because it's just like, okay, well, probably these people aren't calling them socialists, but there are socialists who think that. And
there is a word that should always appear in air quotes.
Except for when you're talking about me. And it's
the only socialists on the internet.
The only socialists in the world. It's so bad because it's like, how are you going to believe in the inherent capabilities of the working class and of all people to lift themselves out of the mess that we're in, and then just be like, everything's fucked, but then also like an attitude that comes along with that a lot, which is just like, people are idiots, aren't they? These people are so stupid always. It's like whenever you talk about Trump with a liberal, they're like, people are so stupid voting for him. Fucking people, you can't trust them. And it's like, I don't know. That's so gross. Yeah. That's like one thing that it's like, if someone calls himself a socialist and believes that, it's like, you just kind of got to write that person off because it's so gross.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I agree. Yeah, it precludes the possibility of any kind of collective response to the problem.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's just one of these responses that is increasingly erratic, isn't it? And it's just, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I'm not going to have kids. It's like, okay, give up, I guess. Cool. But yeah, I don't know. It's not like they're teaching Marxism in school, Dan, as they should be. So you can't really blame people for not really having an understanding.
Oh yeah, Jack, it's called critical race theory.
Oh no. Oh no. I forgot about that. So yeah, I don't know. The main reason I'm bringing all this up is like, it is so serious, but because it's this persistent, ever-present threat. If we were doing this podcast in the 50s, I feel like every day we'd be like, what's it called, like the midnight clock or whatever, like doomsday clock update, 1 minute to midnight, the bombs could be dropped at any second. But now it's just like, because it's so persistent and it's just been getting worse for our entire lives, it's just like, we just don't talk about it as much. And that's, I think, also driving me insane, is the fact that it's like, wait a minute, things are really bad. I remember it and then I forget about it and then I'm like, oh God.
Yeah, didn't Boris Johnson use that metaphor in his introduction to the...
Yeah. I was at a bookstore today and I saw a book ostensibly by Boris Johnson that was called The Churchill Method or something like that. And it was just like...
You should have bought it.
I should have bought it. That's what I should have done. I should have bought that book.
No doubt it would have been a hilarious read.
It probably would have, yeah. It actually probably was funny.
Like, 50% of all books in bookshops are biographies of Churchill, and 50% of those biographies of Churchill are written by Boris Johnson, I think.
Yeah, exactly. God bless him. Yeah, anyway, doomerism, I'm there. And it is just, again, an outgrowth of this, like, lack of political power. Because, again, it's like, how do you explain to people that it's like the Insulate Britain stuff is frustrating? Because you can't, because it's like, well, those people are trying to do something. I'm going to sound like such an asshole, but they just kind of don't really get it. You know what I mean? But it's like, well, what are you supposed to tell them? Because you can't be like, hey, come join the mass party. So I don't know.
It brings me on nicely to the other article from the Weekly Worker that I read.
By the same guy.
Same guy whose name we can't remember. The title of the article we can't remember.
It'll be in the links below.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Which was basically a rundown of different types of green politics, right? So it sort of defined the various different ones, the different green parties, green conservatism, deep green, blah, 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 blah. And one of the responses that I found very interesting was a criticism of the response which says we should relocalize our lives, kind of thing. We should relocalize production. We should sort of fall back into local organization. And it's also an extension of that is a sort of small scale industry, small scale production, kind of work from home, like cottage industries again, kind of thing.
Cottage core.
Which was quite an interesting thing for me to think about in the context of quite a number of things that we have read, right? Like that is largely a policy response for I guess to use a piece of like obscuritist terminology, it's a petty bourgeois response, right? It's an appeal to the petty bourgeois mindset. It's for a kind of capitalism which has basically never existed, which is the kind of like it's all about the sort of Proudhonist, sort of small scale mutualist organization kind of thing. And again, it reminds me of the quote from Marx's foreword to the political program of the Parti Ouvrier, where he's saying there are two responses if you want to overcome the proletariat's dispossession from means of production.
Sure.
Either you restore some form of individual production and individual ownership, which has never existed, which is that sort of petit bourgeois mindset, or you accept that capitalism has collectivized production. This is bringing us back to the readings that we've done on the podcast about the fundamental principles. Either you accept that one of the great advantages of capitalism is its socialized production, and what we have to do now is take social and collective control of that production by democratizing it. And which led me to believe that, or to think about, not only is it fair to say that the climate crisis is a crisis brought on largely by capitalism and its voracious appetite for profit at all costs, and its willingness to exploit nature along with its willingness to exploit human beings. So not only is capitalism the problem, but a form of political economy whereby people can collectively take control of production on the largest scales, i.e. communism, may well be the appropriate solution to, in the long term, to a sort of founding an ecological form of human society.
Yeah. It's a tricky question. It's hugely tricky because, on one end, I definitely, I think, agree with the point that you're getting towards making, which is there's no going back on socializing production and collectivizing production, and because that it would wind up being bad. And we have this, and now we got to work with what we have. But also there has kind of always been this belief that socialism is going to usher in a period of huge abundance for everybody, unlimited abundance even. And that really has to be balanced with the positives and the negatives of capitalism right now. Because I think one thing that's interesting when we talk about the relocalizing of the economies and stuff is that can have benefits and, as you're saying, issues, right? For one thing, it's resources aren't evenly distributed. So I like coffee. I'm drinking some right now. You can't grow any at the moment in the south of England. You know what I mean? But also, wouldn't it be cool if I ate beef? Wouldn't it be cool if I didn't have to get it from a cow that was raised in Argentina and then slaughtered there, and then for some reason the meat was shipped to China and then shipped to here? Wouldn't that be cool? Wouldn't it be cooler if the cow that I ate was just right around here, right? So the answer to how do we balance that is not one, or the question of how do we balance that is not one that I really have an answer to. But I don't know, the idea of regionalizing or relocalizing some aspects of production is hugely exciting to me. Mm-hmm. But also what you're saying is very true. Mm-hmm. That it could absolutely come with huge consequences and not necessarily ones we want.
Yeah, I mean, I think we want to hold on to the scale of production potentially.
Sure.
With the possibility of modifying and mitigating it. I mean, who knows?
Sure, yeah.
We're not sages of the future. But sages of the present, barely.
We're working on the past.
But in some ways, those kind of gross forms of wastage that are hallmarks of our present productive system, i.e., like producing beef in South America because it's cheaper and then transporting it across the world, they are cheaper because of the logics of capitalism.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And the logics of another mode of production may well eliminate those sort of like wasteful aspects of the capitalist mode of production. One would hope.
One would hope, yeah.
If you weren't using the profit motive and the desire to expand exchange values, to use Marxist terminology, but rather were looking to expand use values, then the result might be considerably more localized in the way you're describing in a specific way.
I wonder what the like natural quote unquote like bubble for production is, if that makes any sense. Like, because obviously there's no geographical necessity to have like a t-shirt factory 1,000 miles away. Like I wonder how big, once you get like a natural level of like people in each city that can sustain itself ecologically, like I wonder how big those bubbles would be, and like if that makes any sense at all. You know what I mean? Like where you start to see how far away you start to see like repetition in terms of like factories or something. I don't know if that really makes any sense, but maybe it doesn't. I don't know. Kind of makes me think too just a lot about like something that didn't get talked about at all, I think, in this week's talks, or at least not on the Mockingbird media, which is soil depletion and farming and stuff like that. We're back talking about that. But like, I think that's the thing that's freaking me out the most about climate change. And I did a little bit of digging just to see how bad it is.
Refers to his notes.
Refers to his really that much of notes. And I found a study, Dan, by University of Sheffield. All right. And they basically were explaining why soil depletion is happening. They're basically saying that the way that we put nutrients back into the soil, we've kind of talked about this on the show before, is extremely wasteful, especially the way that we have to produce nitrogen to then go into the ground. I didn't know this. Check this out. The process, I think it's called the Haber-Bosch method or something like that, for producing nitrogen, consumes 5% of all natural gas on the planet just to produce nitrogen to put in the soil, and 2% of all energy usage on the planet. Isn't that insane? Just to produce nitrogen for farming. Phosphorus, you have to mine phosphorus-rich rock, and that's a non-renewable source. And we've basically got to the point where we've gotten all the easy to mine phosphorus. And of course, nutrients all just wash away into the ocean, and that just makes algae blooms and all that bullshit. If you had to guess, Dan,
okay,
what percentage of arable farmland has already been lost just in the last 40 years? If you just had to guess. It's not insane.
Okay. Yeah, scale it for me in terms of like real degrees of doom. It's not insane. 10%.
33%.
Oh, God.
So in the last 40 years, because of this mass level of intensive agriculture, we've lost a third of all arable farmland in 40 years.
Okay.
I'll let that just kind of sit. And you know what else, actually? I took a photo of this because I didn't feel like writing it all down. They were basically explaining how we can get around intensive agriculture. And they had 3 tips. The third one is so funny. The first one, they're basically just like manage soil by like cover crops, rotating annuals, no-till agriculture. That's number 1, no-till agriculture. That's pretty cool. You have to use biotechnology to wean crops off of the artificial world we've created for them, blah, 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 blah. And then the third one is so awesome. Recycling nutrients from sewage in a modern example of the circular economy, which is literally what Marx said. And we all laughed at him for it. We all laughed at Marx for that. And that's basically what everybody is saying, is reducing the metabolic waste by just using sewage as manure. So there you go. Very exciting.
There we go. Just yet one instance of Mark's being corroborated and found to be right.
He's like, just use people's shit.
Well, I was trying to mitigate and moderate perhaps your
My doom?
total doom-ladenness.
Good luck.
And I was going to present you with this. Now, I didn't really I didn't bring any scientific facts with me, Joe.
Oh,
I'm afraid.
I made all this up.
But I mean, in the Paris climate talks in 2015, they were like, we are going to try and limit global temperature rise to well below 2 degrees, ideally 1.5.
Sure.
And a lot of the conversation around these climate talks is, right, okay, how do we keep it to 1.5 degrees of warming? A total which it would seem we are likely to hit sometime in the middle of this century, which I think of as being 50 years away, but actually it's only 30.
I know. when they keep throwing 2030 around, and I'm like, it's like 9 years. I'm like, it's almost 8 years.
Which will necessitate us needing to halve emissions by the end of this decade. So if we can come up with a plan whereby we significantly reduce emissions 50% by the end of the decade, net neutral, what do they call it, by the mid-century, and ideally also find some way to mitigate financially the problems that are going to result from climate change. It's fine, right? That's the plan.
I mean, I think this is the question. This is what I want to say of like, is green capitalism possible? Green in the sense of like mitigating the disasters. I go back and forth on this like minute to minute. Right now I'm like, no, but I think there is a world where something like what you're saying, these emissions can be cut and the impact is softened. But like, I don't know. Everything is leading me to see, like empirically, I feel like I'm like, it's not happening. You know,
I think we need to look at the internal dynamics within the bourgeois class and also look at the relationship between the quote unquote bourgeois governments of the world, but particularly like the G20, say, and question what is the likelihood that the capitalist governments of the world in general are going to be willing to discipline the capitalist class of the world in a way which is necessary to meet these ends. I feel like my thinking is that it is entirely possible for a form of capitalism to emerge, I suppose, or I feel like it's possible for the capitalist class to create a form of capitalism which will allow it to survive with the majority of its power in total intact. But it is going to mean a significant and severe disciplining of certain sections of the capitalist class, i.e. those ones that profit most heavily from the most polluting industries. And I feel like that's the question as to whether that degree of disciplining of the capitalist class is going to result, or whether the governments of the world are going to be unwilling to or unable to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it also, like, questions like this are so complicated because then you have to imagine, like, specific individual bases where it's like, okay, that's happening. This kind of censuring of certain sectors of the bourgeoisie has happened. But then what happens when things are kind of on an even keel, but then there are mass human migrations and everything kind of falls apart?
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Or they're like tensions rise again between like Pakistan and India, and everyone's like, "Fuck, please don't, please don't."
Yeah, I was speculating that in my mind, having thought about this topic today, I've was artificially separated the two responses that are necessary to be the one which limits emissions and the one which puts significant funds aside necessary to mitigate the results of the warming that we've already seen.
Sure.
And I've sort of come to wonder whether the first of those might be achieved, but not the second, and we might see increased curtailment of migration, increased sort of xenophobia and nationalism as the result of the results of climate change.
Yeah. I feel like the most likely outcome is just like a complete statification of any kind of like the capitalist class, like political economy becomes its kind of like natural just like unity, and things for like the UK and certain parts of the United States are able to kind of continue as they are, but just worse. And as you're saying, like these, tensions, these like nationalist bullshit, like fascist tensions rise again when, certain individual crises of the greater climate change catastrophe kind of unfold. They react to them. But it just seems like, to reference another podcast, when Andy and Elliot came on, the Poor Pearl's Almanac, we forgot to ask them about this, but like they're like at the beginning of some of their episodes, they do like that story, and it seems like I could kind of see something like that happen, because it's like things are kind of normal, but they just get worse. And it's like, you can't get coffee, people are stealing from my damn allotment, and things are just kind of slowly degrading and getting worse until maybe something gives. And whether that's people getting sick of like what is left of capitalism and being like, fuck this, we're going to take power into our own hands. One would only hope. One would hope that happens before then. Or just a general kind of like malaise and the amount of disasters we read about every day, but on steroids. You know what I mean? We'll see.
With the caveat that I do understand that prognostications about the threat of fascism have a tendency to be, in some ways, excessive, hysterical, and Cassandra-esque. Sort of spinning off the reading that we did for this past week's episode of the podcast, all about the sort of general political economy, or generally about, at least in part, the political economy of Nazi Germany.
Sure.
It's not entirely unreasonable for me to imagine a form of government having to come into place which is willing to regulate severely certain aspects of the capitalist mode of production, which is sufficient to mitigate the problem of climate change on an emissions basis, i.e. to talk about the disciplining of the capitalist class that we were talking about before, and then whose solution to the crises resulting from climate change are the ones that we were just talking about, the increasingly authoritarian, sort of more borders and less migration, insular looking, and on all the rest.
Just to say, when I first heard about Insulate Britain, I thought it was like kind of like a fash kind of thing. It sounds like authoritarian, right? Like, I don't know, Insulate Britain. Like, I thought it was.
Oh, I
like
see what you mean.
Protests
like,
against migrants.
Yeah.
Insulate Britain. The fuck? What about everybody else? You know what I mean? I don't know. Insulate Britain. I don't know about that.
Yeah. But then you realise that Britain just has the crappiest housing stock in basically the entire world. And we just need a bit of better insulation.
That's we were actually just talking about that. All right. Well, I don't know how long we want to go on for without being too depressed. I don't really have anything else to say other than to reinforce that, like, you should have hope and that you need to have hope, because otherwise, what are you going to do? And and you do need to, like, it is useful to tell people, like, hey, here's what's going to happen. Like, the, sea levels are going to rise. All this crap's going to happen. But also, like, there is a solution. Yeah. There's a solution. It's been staring us in the face for quite some time. And it involves us doing something about it and taking power into our own hands collectively. So,
Yeah. We're going rather long. You just reminded me of the kind of, like, the question of that we've come up against before a little bit, which is pitting the general strategy of patience for building the workers' movement, for building the party, and pit that against the generally apocalyptic timescales that we're talking about in terms of what needs to be done to meet the impending climate crisis head on and actually mitigate. And so I was thinking today somewhat about reinterpreting the idea of working class parties and organisations outside of revolutionary times, working toward improving the interests of the working class internal to capitalist society, and what bigger threat to the working class is there but climate change?
Yeah.
And so it's gotten me thinking about what an appropriate response is, which is not simply calling for revolution. But I'm yet to come up with an answer, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we should say that, like, do I want to say this? If a capitalist comes up with a solution, even just like a minor solution, temporary, it would be okay to be like, yeah, let's do that. Let's just do that. Because, like, I don't know. I don't see a revolution on the horizon anytime soon. So, yeah, I don't know. If a solution presents itself, not like it's obviously we're not going to find like a complete solution under capitalism, but like something that even slows it. Because we're not talking about like Jeff Bezos taking over the world and we need to stop him. We are talking about like mass famines and a sizable percentage of the world's population dying.
Sure.
So, you know.
Yeah. I mean, the answer is the same as it's the answer to everything else, right? Like, conscious members of the working class need to be involved in all levels of social life. And that includes the collective social response to climate change and all of the iterations of the protest movements that result, and be there to propagate socialist and communist ideas internal to those movements.
Sure.
And where it doesn't directly conflict, support moves toward reducing emissions.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
While still being a socialist.
Yeah.
It's the loyal opposition or whatever. So, yeah, great. Fuck. Go join Insulate Britain protests and wave a hammer and sickle flag around is, I think, what you're saying.
Yeah, quite. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, yeah.
cool. Yeah, I'll bring my Lenin cap.
Yeah. Me, you, and the pensioners.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The new lefties.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah. Have
Yeah.
hope.
Yeah.
Have the typical Chomskyism optimism over despair. Because what else are you going to do? That's about what I have to say, I think.
Quite. Yeah. He doesn't sound convinced.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. No, I'm not. Yeah. I don't know. It is just to reiterate, like, it's okay to freak the fuck out every now and then, because I don't know. I'm not going to say that like our generation is the first generation to be confronted with this, because it's not, but like it's real. And it makes sense for this to kind of like seep into your anxieties and to kind of put you on edge and everything like that. That totally makes sense. But we just got to do something about it.
Yeah.
So that's that. Yeah.
Well said.
Well said. We'll have a new episode out on Friday. It'll be great. And hopefully we'll do another one of these again soon.
Yeah, I'm down for that. Thank you for joining us for our
Thank you very much.
incoherent ramblings.
Yeah,
It's
we
been
ran out of
enjoyable.
time to talk
It's
about
been
Chapter
nice.
2 of Capital, which is a shame. Wow.
Damn it.
We'll get
Maybe
that done.
next time.
Maybe next time. Yeah, and we'll see you next time, I guess.
Yep, definitely.
How long was that? 39 minutes. All right. I wonder how